The hero's breathtaking war stories are quite extraordinary. Our team has been researching for a long time to get this special information. Please watch this video carefully. You can use this super thanks button below the video to support our team for their hard effort to create this. Let's start if you are ready. Eugene was a very successful student. He was looking forward to serving his country after he finished school. But when he graduated, his country wasn't a crisis. Eugene wanted to defend his country against the Russian invasion, so he joined the army. His military service was very successful, and he was quickly promoted when Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. Eugene was one of the most successful lieutenants in the Ukrainian army. After the Russian army advanced into Ukraine, thousands of Ukrainians volunteered to join the army. Eugene's father, Alec, was one of them. When Alec's deployment was announced, it was an emotional moment for both of them. It was assigned to the 92nd Mechanized Brigade of the Army, named after the 17th century Kazakh military, Yan Surko. The commander of this brigade was Alec's successful son, Eugene, father and son. They're on the same front trying to resist the Russian invasion. They participated in many operations together. In these operations, they won many victories against the Russian army in the battles they fought together. They managed to liberate 3 towns from occupation. These operations were very emotional, but it was even more emotional for the woman waiting for them at home. Alex's wife and Eugene's mother were waiting for them at home. She was very worried, but also very proud. She kept praying that her husband and son would come home. Then this war was over. Alex and Eugene thought of her. In every battle on the field, the Ukrainian army's liberation was marked by very difficult battle. As a result of this operation, the Ukrainian army was successful. The Russian army suffered many casualties during the operation. Lieutenant Eugene played a big role in this operation. He saved the lives of many soldiers with a decision he made to rank this operation. Ukrainian soldiers were advancing with tanks when the Russian army launched a missile attack. As these missiles targeted the tanks, Lieutenant Eugene made a critical. The tanks of the Ukrainian army advanced into the woods here. 3 tanks moved between the trees. Ukrainian soldiers had dug a very big holes on these trees. In fact, this hole was dug to shoot down the Russian tanks. But Eugene made a clever decision to drop the Ukrainian army tanks into the hole, which allowed the soldiers to escape the missile attack. But they were trapped inside the tanks. For hours, Ukrainian army reinforcement arrived and destroyed the Russian missiles. After that, the tanks in the pit were brought up and the soldiers were rescued. By taking this decision, Eugene saved all 3 tanks and the soldiers inside. One of the soldiers was his father. The lieutenant's great success and strategy in this operation was appreciated by Ukrainian commanders. Well, Eugene was considered a hero in the Ukrainian army. In another battle, he managed to kill 60 Russian soldiers with a machine gun. He became a legend for his feat in combat. Ukrainian soldiers had great admiration for the lieutenant. The lieutenant liberated many regions and saved dozens of soldiers, his liars. But in one operation, things did not go his. In the town of Pikaki, there was a big battle against the Russian army. Many Russian soldiers were killed in the hours of fighting. But the Russian army was joined by new review from the other front. Among the ammunition brought by the new soldiers were rockets. The first person who saw that the Russian army was going to launch a rocket attack was Alec. The father of Lieutenant Alec was a retired colonel from the Ukrainian. He was very good with machine guns and sniper weapons. He was a sniper to rank this operation with the scope of his rifle. He was following all the movements of the Russian soldiers and killing them one by one. While looking through the scope, he noticed 2 Russian soldiers holding rockets. He immediately fired and killed one of the Russian soldiers, but the other soldier was out of Alec's sight. Alec realized that this soldier was going to fire a missile and warrant the other soldier. At that moment, he dropped his gun and ran towards his son. As soon as the Russian soldiers fired the rocket, Alec jumped on his son Eugene. The young lieutenant fell to the ground with his father. Immediately after the rocket explosion, Eugene opened his eyes. Sheriff Nell from the rocket had cut his face. He felt great pain. He immediately wanted to stand up and shoot, but he could not move because his father was on top of him and not moving at all. The young lieutenant realized that his father was dead. As he slowly lowered his father to the ground, he noticed the sheriff, No, in his back, retired, had saved young Lieutenant Eugene's life. Eugene kept fighting despite his father's death. He picked up the sniper rifle. His father had left him and started shooting Russian soldiers one by one. Eugene was shooting like his father. Russian soldiers couldn't touch his bullets. The Ukrainian army managed to win this battle too. But the young lieutenant was saddened by the loss of his father. Eugene's moment affected all Ukrainian soldiers. Now, everyone in the Ukrainian army knew the story of the lieutenant and his father. It was so reported in the press. The Vayan press reported dozens of stories about Eugene's achievement. The young lieutenants became one of the most popular people in Ukraine. This also caught the attention of Zelensky. Zelensky decided to do something about it. Hero of Ukraine is the highest national title that can be awarded to a citizen by the President of Ukraine. It has been awarded in special cases since 1998. President Zelensky of Ukraine decided to give the award to Lieutenant Eugene at a special ceremony. Van Eugene received the award. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Valery Zane, a close friend of his father, was applauding Kip. It was a very emotional moment for both of them. Van Eugene received this award. The cigars of his face had not yet dis. These scars on his face were very impressive for a whole Ukrainian people. Everyone who watched this ceremony was convinced that Eugene was a real hero. Eugene's extraordinary story touched the people of Ukraine. Solidarity in the country grew even more. The young lieutenant not only won victories on the battlefield, but also increased the solidarity of its people. Even soldiers in the Russian army followed the news of Eugene's great heroes, and the young lieutenant became one of the symbols of this war. What do you think about Eugene's story? Do you think this award from President Zelensky is enough? What do you think about the heroic soldiers in the Ukrainian army? What do you think about the heroism of Eugene's father Ali? Share your thoughts with us. Next news. Video footage of a powerful explosion appeared on the border of the Khan region, and the Crimea residents of Crimea took a video of the explosion near Armyaz a few days ago after it became known that there was a powerful explosion roaring on the border of the Crimean Khan region. A more detailed video has emerged that reveals the power of the explosion. In the video frames presented, it's possible to see the column of smoke from the explosion rising to a height of tens of meters and some fragments scattered to the sides. Initially, it was reported that the explosion occurred on the territory of the Crimea, but at the moment it is known that the explosion occurred on the territory of the Kherson region. Authorities preferred to keep their silence by not making a statement on the subject. The explosion that took place near Armjank clearly reveals the incessant attacks on Crimea showed that the peninsula is still the ultimate target despite the Russian offensive in Donbass. Although most of the conflict in Ukraine are taking place in Donbass, especially in and around Bakhmut, Kiev has kept its eyes on Crimea. It seems that this spot was beaten in the skies near Silvatopol for 2 days straight. The governor of the occupation of Sevastopol, Mikhail Rivo, announced the Black Sea Fleet and local air defense shot down 2 Ukrainian drones in the Sevastopol region. Bravo's Jeff shot down several more UAVs in the water zone in the region of the Republic of Crimea. Everything is calm in the city. He tried to calm the locals by saying to trust only official information. However, while everything was calm, the ferry services were stopped during. This shows that the severity of the attack is more serious. Meanwhile, video footage of a massive cloud apparently caused by an explosion near a Russian military base about 100 miles north of Arman, a town on the northern tip of the Crimean Peninsula, began appearing on social media. It's unclear what happened at the moment, but the local Ukrainian Crimean Wind Telegram channel said Russian officials provide explanations ranging from an unusually shaped cloud to ongoing training and destruction of WW2. Whatever the reason, Crimea has been a frequent target of Ukrainian drones. Crimea is a key and decisive area in Ukrainian war. Therefore, attacks have to be carried out frequently in Crimea and the regions close to Crimea. Both countries continue to struggle within the territory of Ukraine, especially in Crimea. As the first year of the war is almost over, the parties still have no intention of a ceasefire due to the importance of the Antonovsky Bridge. The attack attempts here are frequently repeated. The other day, the Ukrainian armed forces once again struck the Antonovsky Bridge. Residents of the Khan region reported new explosions near the Antonovsky Bridge at noon. Despite the collapse of the Antonovsky Bridge, it is impossible to cross the left. Despite this, we learned that there were violent explosions in the Antonovsky Bridge area. The exact number of roaring explosions was not specified here. However, the results of the explosion were visible even from a great distance. It is possible to see the explosion moment more clearly in the photos shared on social media platforms with the severity of the attack. It is not possible to determine exactly whether the blow fell on the bridge itself or on the left, as huge gray dust clouds in the region rose to the skies of Kherson. It is currently unknown exactly what the target was and with which weapons were used to carry out the attack. However, considering the past attacks on the bridge by the Ukrainian armed forces, the possibility of using HIMARS missiles is quite high. In addition, an official statement has not yet been made about the explosions that occurred in the Antonovsky Bridge area. So why is the Antonovsky Bridge a key point and why is it so important? Russia had focused on the Kherson offensive for months and initially blocked the Ukrainian offensive. But with Putin's forces focused on Kherson, the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces General Valery Zuni secretly gathered forces in the Kaki region, defeating an outnumbered Russian force and recapturing thousands of square kilometers in. Russia diverted its reserves to halt the tide in Kaki. This made Russia's troops in Khan suddenly vulnerable. The commander of the Russian forces in Ukraine, General Sergei Sirkin, in a controversial decision, left the city of Khan without a fight. He ordered the evacuation of Russian citizens from the right bank of the Dpa River and offered them asylum on the left bank and elsewhere in Russia. In addition, General Sirkin shifted Russian forces to the east bank of the Dpa River. Sirkin blew up bridges to prevent Ukrainian armed forces from following him. Russia did this successfully until mid-November. In fact, Russia's decision to withdraw from Khan without a fight highlights the different strategies employed by both sides in the first year and can have a real impact. However, strategic bridges in Kherson have repeatedly hosted violent explosions. The first attack of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Antonovsky Bridge was made on July the 19th. The next day, the attack was repeated. Local occupation officials announced that the passage was forcibly closed. The most striking of these explosions took place in the past months during the night attack. With the help of HIMARS, part of the strategically important Antonovsky Bridge was blown up from the occupied Crimea to Kursk to supply the invading Corral with new military personnel and military equipment. A crushing blow was dealt not only to the bridge connecting the shores of the Dnipro and the occupied Khan region, but also to the camp of the Russian army. Its stockpiles of weapons and equipment. Demolishing the bridge is the top priority to further drive the Russian invaders away from the right bank of the Dnipro and liberate Kherson. The inability to use the Antonovsky Bridge greatly complicates the logistics which will prevent the supply of their groups around Khan. In the Khan context, geography aggravated the supply dilemma for the Russians, as the Russians had to move their warehouses to the left bank of the Dapa River. The supply lines extend to the river, which currently has no functional bridges, and all have been rendered unusable by the HIMARS attacks. Now let's look at the capabilities of the HIMARS missiles used in the Antonovsky Bridge. Why are Ukrainian, its Western support, assured of victory in Kang? And why does Russia seem to settle for its defeated Kang? Both questions are likely to have a one-word answer. That answer is HIMARS and perhaps geography, accuracy, range, and mobility. At the three highlights of the HIMARS system, without warning, the single HIMARS rocket can accomplish what less accurate artillery shells can't. For example, the 16 HIMARS systems sent to Ukraine in June seem to have leveled the playing field for. Despite the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Russian artillery, the 50-mile range of the Hammer system gives a single system more geographic spread than dozens of Russian cannons. The system has excellent terrain mobility. It can break through the trench, move to a well-placed launch point, and fire several rockets at short intervals, assuming it is detected as soon as it fires. The system can reposition away from the launch point before it is compromised by counter-battery fire. Finally, and perhaps most importantly in the Kherson context, HIMARS give Ukrainians the ability to hit targets that the Russians consider safe. The accuracy and range of the HIMARS forced Russia to locate fuel and ammunition storage tanks deep inland away from the front line. So how can the Ukrainian war end? We may find that neither protagonist is able to outdo the other over a period of a few. This is manifested in the stability of the main front lines as conflicts continue over places of secondary importance. For example, Moscow may continue the offensive against Kiev with limited success and focus its efforts on consolidating Donbas. Ukraine, on the other hand, may try to push its advantage southward from Khan to threaten Crimea. This scenario does not preclude intense conflict and limited success on both sides. They cannot change the overall balance of several factors can come together to bring about this situation. Western military aid may reach a plateau due to the state of stockpiles and the nature of weapons due to a learning curve on the Russian side, especially in the articulation between the different armies. Ukraine's warfare could remain without the spectacular effects of the end of summer 2022. External factors can lead to military and diplomatic corruption. Neither side is in a position to force their own people and their allies to negotiate on the basis of the current balance of military. There was no clear success for Russia. Territorial integrity has not yet been achieved for Kiev. Entering into negotiations is an admission of failure for Vladimir Putin and puts him at risk for Vladimir Zelensky. Accepting negotiations would be a renunciation that would cause him to lose the very wide support he currently enjoys, both internally and externally. In this option, Ukraine will become a new unresolved conflict in the post-Soviet space in 2023. Next, today, a manuscript was discovered that reveals the secrets of the Russian army. This notebook seized from a Russian base has caused great panic in the Kremlin. Ukrainian intelligence is analyzing this notebook. So what was in this notebook? Why is this notebook so important? Can a notebook change the course of a war? We will answer all these questions. You can support us by subscribing to our channel and using the super thanks button below the video. We look forward to your support for the continuation of our independent journalism. Let's get started. The Russian army was in a hurry to invade. The Russian army did not know how to maintain control over the occupied territories. The Ukrainian army was making a controlled retreat. The Russian army's advance lasted until the west bank of the Dpa River. After that, the Ukrainian army gained a strategically strong offensive position thanks to its operations. The Ukrainian army ensured that the Russian army retreated with heavy losses. The Russian army withdrew from most of the occupied territories. The Ukrainian army managed to liberate many towns and city centers. In these ongoing operations, 150,000 soldiers died in the Russian army. The Ukrainian army made very clever moves in these operations by carrying out sudden operations. It left the Russian army defenseless on many fronts. In particular, operations were carried out against Russian bases where ammunition depots were, and the ammunition of the Russian army was confiscated. Ammunition was not the only thing the Ukrainian military encountered at Russian bases. A lot of data about the war secrets of the Russian army were seized from these bases. It was especially interesting that the basement of the Russian bases were used as a prison. So who was kept in the prisons of the Russian bases? The Russian public did not strongly support Putin's decision to invade. Many soldiers in the Russian army were also reluctant to participate in this war, but Putin forcibly sent them to the battlefield. Some of the Russian soldiers on the battlefield began to mutiny. Many of the mutinies were successful, but in some bases, Russian commanders arrested the soldiers and sent them to prisons in the basement. The most intelligent and talented soldiers in the Russian army were leaving the army in mutiny. The Russian soldiers held in prison were the best in the army longer. These soldiers were in prison. The more angry they became with their commanders. It is thought that the Russian army executed some of the rebels after a while. But what were the Russian rebel soldiers doing in prison? One of these soldiers managed to change the course of the war by doing something extraordinary. A Russian soldier wrote memoirs during his imprisonment. This notebook is now in the hands of the Ukrainian NT. The Ukrainian army organized an operation to liberate the Russian-occupied town of Lya, realizing that it would be defeated. During this operation, the Russian army left the region in a big, brotherly way. The Russian army left many things behind. As they fled, Ukrainian soldiers entered the buildings, used as a base by the Russian army, and started an investigation. There are many weapons and bullets in the building. All of these weapons ended up in the hands of the Ukrainian army. When Ukrainian soldiers went down to the basement, they noticed a bunker. This bunker was apparently used as a prison. While examining this room, the soldiers noticed a notebook. When they opened the notebook, they could not believe their eyes. A Russian soldier had written everything he had experienced in this notebook. This 91-page text was written by an officer. However, this officer wanted to hide his own name in all the notes. He refers to himself as PLTJR. However, this notebook contains the names of other people. For example, according to these documents, the commander of the Russian army in the town of Lya is Colonel Ivan Popov. Ivan Popov is one of the colonels in charge of the Russian Navy's operations in the Baltic Sea. He also served in China until 2017. According to these notebooks, Popov is eager to be promoted within the military. Popov is even ready to send these soldiers to their deaths for his own career. Plat Jr's memoirs contain information about many commanders. This information shows that there was a great rivalry between Russian commanders. It is explained that there was a great coordination problem due to the rival commanders. Russian commanders are trying to put themselves forward in order to rise in the army. One of the most important items in these notebooks is information about the recent escalation of operations by the Ukrainian army. It is sad that Russian soldiers are experiencing great fear following the escalation of the Ukrainian army's operations. Plat Jr. says that all the Russian soldiers he talked to were afraid, seeing the fear of the soldiers. Hackett Jr. decides to do something to change this. ETT describes this episode in his memoirs as follows. We didn't want to die for Pop's promotion. We all know now that the Russian army can't win this war. If we don't retreat from this town, we will all die. I've been trying to talk to Popov about this, but he won't listen to his officers. I talked to my friends. We made a plan to report Popov and retreat. Popov's found out about. We thought he would have killed us. So my friends and I started to organize all the soldiers. We made a new plan to escape from this base. Plat Jr's efforts were very dangerous for the Russian commanders. The commanders caught him and threw him in prison. However, Jr. managed to cause more damage to the Russian army in this notebook he wrote while in prison. Because this notebook contains the coordinates of the Russian army's ammunition, the Ukrainian army is expected to organize new operations against these depots. It also describes many war crimes committed by the Russian army. These very bloody crimes show that the Russian army does not listen to any rules. Ukrainian intelligence, which is examining the notebook, is conducting research on the war crimes contained therein. The file to be repaired as a result of these investigations will be submitted to the International Criminal. What the Russian officer wrote will be accepted as evidence. In this way, Russia is expected to receive very heavy penalties. Russia is in trouble with this notebook. The officer codenamed Flaunt Jr. has managed to inflict great damage on the Russian army. This notebook has become a nightmare for the Kremlin leaders. The Russian officer could change the course of the war with his writings. The Russian army does not know exactly what information is contained in this notebook, but they have already started to relocate ammunition depots, the Ukrainian, or we can achieve a great military success by conducting operations at the coordinates of this notebook. What do you think about this notebook found by Ukrainian soldier? How do you think this notebook will affect the course of the war? What do you think about the rebellious Russian soldiers? The next intel. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has received and continues to receive great support, especially from Western states. Few countries supported Russia while some key countries chose to join the party in the name of. One of these countries is Turkey. Turkey, both in terms of NATO membership and trade relations with Russia and Ukraine, has tried to find a middle way instead of being a party since the beginning of the war. Of course, along with these efforts, it provided weapons and humanitarian aid to the Ukrainian army, including state-of-the-art UAVs such as the Biota-TB. The Ukrainian army hurt the Russians a lot with the TB2S. In addition, Turkey provided Ukraine with artillery munitions, long-range high-heads, multiple rocket launcher systems, heavy armored infantry vehicles, military training, and intelligence through various channels. In addition, it recently signed an agreement commit to send Leopard 2 to Ukraine. Upon the call of Poland, Turkey is one of the NATO countries with the most Leopard. Turkey has imposed economic sanctions against Russia primarily because it is a NATO member. Although these sanctions decisions were only for show in terms of bilateral relations, they damaged Russia economically. Even if Turkey still sends non-military supplies to Russia for exports, Turkish banks do not work with Russia. It has been reported recently that a new one of these sanctions is about to come. Turkey may stop working with Russian airlines. In the background of Turkey's announcement of its intention to seize any ground handling services of Boeing and Airbus passenger aircraft, it was learned that Ankara was considering the possibility of completely rejecting interaction with Russian air carriers using foreign aircraft. Turkey may be completely closed to Russian airlines due to sanctions. Russian planes flying to Turkey consist of U.S. ports due to the sanctions. They will be banned from refueling and providing services at Turkish airports. The ban is expected to come into effect in the near future. Earlier, Turkey confirmed that it had received relevant notifications from Airbus and Boeing and sent a warning to Russian air carriers. Turkish airlines are expected to completely replace Russian airlines, but it is not known where the Russian airports will be able to serve Turkish aircraft, considering that Turkey is one of the most popular destinations for Russians. This will seriously affect the civil aviation industry in Russia. On the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, Turkey's making geopolitical attacks on places that Russia has long dominated, such as Central Asia and the South Caucasians. At the same time, Ankara is increasingly focusing on areas that Moscow should have tight control over, namely the Russian Federation itself. So what exactly does Turkey aim for? It is no secret that some political forces in Turkey consider some Russian lens as part of the Turkish world. In February 2022, Turkish media listed 10 regions of Russia as autonomous Turkish Republic, including Stanchia and Bashkorto. A few months ago, David, the leader of the Nationalist Movement Party, the coalition partner of the ruling Justice and Development Party, presented President Tayyip Erdogan with a controversial map of the Turkish world. It included Russia's southern regions such as Kuban and Rostov, and the republics of the North Caucasians, East Siberia, and Crimea, which were occupied from Ukraine in 2000. But instead of protesting, the Kremlin praised Digester. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that he did not see anything shameful in Bat's gift to Erdogan, and claimed that Turkey was only trying to maintain ties with its citizens. These developments opened the door to a new route for Turkish foreign policy. Ukraine cannot protect the interests of its civilians living in Turkey. An increasing number of Russians, including those fleeing Russia, are having difficulty obtaining residence permits in Turkey after President Putin announced his partial mobilization in September 2022. At the same time, Turk authorities are granting long-term residence permits to Crimean, Tatars, and Turkey-speaking Muslims from a region anchors within its sphere of Ankara's message is clear. Russians of Turkish origin will be given priority above anyone else. For many years, Turkey has been developing cultural and economic ties with Digestion, Russia's troubled region in the North Caucasians. Turkey also become the main partner of Stan. Ankara invested $2.5 billion in the Tatan economy in 2021, suppressing the foreign investment of 79 other countries, including Russia in the same year. The funding came after Tatan. President Rouhani visited Ankara, where he met with Wan to discuss ways of deepen relations agreements on economic cooperation, especially in the production sector. Then at the International Economic Summit held in the Tatan capital Kazan last May, officials from Turkey and Tatan promised to create conditions to support entrepreneurship. Some Russian analysts say Moscow sees Rissan as an economic gateway to the Islamic world, but the Kremlin prefers to rely on China and its leader Ram to develop political ties with Islamic State. There are practical reasons why the latter chose Russia, starting with its troubled relationship with Turkey. Kara was involved in a series of murders against Chechen residents living in Turkey, as well as allegations of espionage on Turkey soil. Also in December 2021, when a park named after former Chechen rebel leader Zak opened in Lean in Turkey, rebel-separated militia threatened direct and monument to Kurdistan Workers' Party leader Abdullah Öcalan, a sworn enemy of the Turkish authorities. This plan was ultimately shelved after Putin met in Saçay in August 2022. Turkey then sought to establish closer cooperation with the Chechen Republic on various issues, including investment and trade. Turkey's interest in Russian issues was most recently demonstrated last month when leaders in exile from Russia's North Caucasian Republic met in Istanbul to call for independence. English leaders in exile issued a statement stressing the need for the consolidation of English society around the idea of independence, as well as the desire to preserve cultural and religious. As the Kremlin closed its eyes again, Erdogan even went on national television and bragged that all demands regarding stand digestion and other regions were met. Although anchored rice to increase its presence in the region of Russia where Turkish and Muslim people live, the Kremlin seems determined to maintain its economy and vertical ties with Turkey at all costs. Turkey will undoubtedly continue to use a weakening position of the Kremlin to strengthen its economic, political, and cultural ties with Russia's ethnic regions. In the long run, Stan and perhaps even China may turn to Turkey as allies if the war in Ukraine leads to collapse of the Russian Federation, or some predict. Russia's defeat in Ukraine gave Turkey a significant advantage over Moscow in many areas of its bilateral relations. Earlier, the Organization of Turkey's State had initiated the creation of a single alphabet. This step will help speed up the process of ensuring the linguistic unity of the Turkish state. Prior to that, as Stand Declaration, which aims to strengthen the relations between them. Turkey is a powerful figure due to its geopolitical position, both its dominance over the Caucasian geography and its bilateral relations where the Ukrainian Russia make Turkey somewhat inviable. Russia will not want to confirm the country like Turkey, and it is watching what is going on in the face of Turkey's being a NATO member. On the other hand, Turkey's support of Ukraine's war effort makes this actor important. Enough relations between Turkey, Russia, and Ukraine are hanging by a thread. As it seems in the coming days, we will be here to convey the developments between these three.